one document completely changed my career. Not because it contained some incredible distributed systems architecture, not because it contained some amazing database design, but because it convinced people. It convinced engineers, it convinced managers, it convinced those non technical stakeholders to invest engineering resources into an idea that I was proposing. To be honest, documents like these have helped me go from a ticket taker to architecting cross team systems in a span of 2 years. And throughout this process, I realized something super critical. Engineers think design docs are like technical documents, but they're actually not. They are persuasion documents. You are selling your idea. You are selling your thinking. You are selling why people need to invest engineering time and resources into what you're proposing. And if people don't buy into your thinking, it doesn't matter how technically brilliant your solution is. It just won't matter. In this video, I'll share with you 3 mistakes that most engineers make in their design documents and how fixing them can completely change how people perceive your ideas and how they buy into it. Before even getting into the nitty gritty, I want to talk about 3 main questions that a design doc helps answer before it even talks about implementation. Why does it matter? Why this solution? And why now specifically? And most engineers, when they approach design docs, they try to answer just one question. How does this work? And that's exactly why so many design docs feel like just technical, dry documentation instead of leadership. And once I understood that specific thing, everything changed. I've gone through this process myself. Early on, my documents used to look like everyone else's. All those architecture diagrams, database tables, API contracts, and so on. Technically correct, but totally forgettable. I remember looking at documentations from some staffless engineers, and that's when I realized that, shit, maybe I'm approaching this from the wrong angle. And once I made that shift and made that change in my own documentation, I started getting feedback from a lot of these staffless engineers and even engineering managers on how engaging my documents were. And that's when I slowly started realizing that most documents that I end up reading from other engineers, they're just dry and boring. They're not engaging enough. So most of them I don't even read. But making the documents engaging, having people buy into it when you read it is the key. As I went through this process, I realized that there was a repeatable structure to a lot of these documents, which is consolidated into something that I'm calling the detective doc framework right now. The reason being, when you read a detective novel, you're engrossed into the novel. You follow along the story. You start making your own assumptions on who the suspect is and how, as the detective progresses and finally comes to a conclusion that this is the culprit, you're like, ah, that makes total sense. Or shit, I did not expect that. And that's how I go about framing my documentations. But I don't have enough time today to go through the entire nitty gritty of this, but the 3 mistakes I talk about will cover a lot of these foundations. Mistake 1, you start with the suspect. Most engineers jump straight into the solution. Oh, we should migrate to Kafka, we should introduce a cache, I think we need to break the service into two, and so on. Here's the problem. Nobody cares unless you make them. They haven't experienced a problem deep enough to know why the solution even matters. Like, why introduce Kafka? Why add in a cache? Why break the service into two? Imagine walking into a detective movie and the detective walks into the room and tells, here's the culprit. The movie will be over in 5 minutes. It's not engaging and no one really cares. There's not enough build up. The interesting part is learning what happened, why it happened, who was affected, how they were affected, and that helps build engaging story. And that's how you want to build your design docs as well. You want to have it flow like a story. So do not start with here's the solution. Start with here's the problem. Here's how this problem is affecting us. Here's what will happen if we fix the problem. Here's what happens if we do nothing about this. And now here's the solution to go about fixing this problem. You see what I did? I added a lot of stuff before even pitching the solution. And that's what makes people buy into a document to understand why the solution even matters. And like I mentioned, they're not technical documents, they are persuasion documents. Mistake 2, you defend a solution instead of your decision. So, this is another big mindset shift that I personally had to make. When I see a lot of the engineering documents, especially these technical documents that we've been talking about, a lot of engineers just propose one specific solution to the problem. The problem is there's never one right way in engineering. It's always about the least worst trade offs that your team or a company is fine with. So there's never one correct answer to a problem. And yeah, it might go against what is said in the industry, but it's not always about the best way or the industry standards. It's about what brings the most ROI to your team and your company, and weighing those trade offs and then pitching a solution. So, yeah, the best architecture is not always the best decision. The clean, best practices solution might potentially take 6 months, but a slightly messier solution might deliver 80% of that value within a month. So now you have to see what is delivering more ROI. You have seen this video. Now you know you need to see what delivers the ROI that your company is actually looking for. That will help you buy people into your idea that you're proposing. So that's exactly why. Don't sell a solution, sell a decision on why we need to take a particular step forward. And compare the trade offs and make them very visible. Don't make assumptions. Talk clearly about this is what we will gain and this is what we'll lose if we go ahead with this solution. Compare a couple of different solutions and then propose your solution that you want the team to go ahead with. There is one important caveat to this. For most engineers up till senior level, this should suffice doing that trade off analysis, comparing options. But as you start going above and the scope of your projects increase, it's highly likely you won't really have to compare these trade offs and you will just propose one solution that will impact a lot of these. That's what I'm actually learning as I'm working on my staff level impact as well. And I'm being mentored by a senior staff engineer who I learned this through directly around how I need to slightly tweak my documentations. Because the scope of the problems previously was smaller, so I could compare trade-offs. For example, if I wanted to propose which database you want to use, then comparing different databases and etc. was a thing. But now if I'm architecting cross-team systems, there's too many moving parts. I can't compare pros and cons. I have to talk about, okay, this is the vision and why we need to go ahead with this vision, and maybe slightly talk about some alternatives that I might have considered. But yeah, that's for staff levels stuff. I might make a different series about my path to staff engineer as well. Anyways, moving on to the next one. Mistake three, you're writing only for engineers instead of other people as well. This is probably one of the easiest mistakes to miss because, like I mentioned, when engineers write design docs, you think of all the technical details, architecture diagrams, database tables, data modeling, and API contracts, API definitions, and things like that, right? But the thing is, only engineers might really care about these specific things. But when it comes to you to persuade people to sell your ideas, you're more likely to be selling to these non technical stakeholders like project managers, product managers, engineering managers, VPs. So if your documents are too technical, they might stop reading after page two because this just makes no sense to them. And with mistake one and two, yeah, no one will even give a shit about what you're proposing or what solution you're talking about. So yeah, they're alignment tools first and then their technical documents. Sometimes nowadays, when I'm working on bigger projects as well, one thing I've helped is I create two documents. One's a high level proposal, which talks more about the problem, what the problem is, why we need to fix it, what will happen if we fix it, what will happen if we don't fix it, and then talk about some high level technical stuff. And then I'll have a separate, more technical document talking about the implementation, but that comes after I get buy in from the first document to actually lead this project and work on it. So, yeah, I create two documents, not just one. The first document helps me persuade people, can create alignment, and the second document helps me talk about the implementation details. So, what does this mean for you? If you want to write documents like a senior engineer, stop asking, did I explain the architecture well enough? Start asking, did I convince people that this deserves engineering time? Because that is the real job. You're selling an idea, you're selling a solution to a problem instead of just selling an architecture. So, yeah, like we covered before, your document should answer what the problem is, why that problem matters, and what will happen if you fix and don't fix it. And especially if you focus on these things, people stop seeing you as just a code monkey or an engineer. They start seeing you as someone who actually cares about the business and why the technical portion, the engineering portion helps the business. That's exactly what happened in my own career. Because as I started putting more time and efforts into these documentation, my technical skills also grew because now I had to think outside the box to come up with the different solutions, compare the trade-offs, understand what my leadership cares about, and then put my solution and try to quote unquote sell my solution in that way. And obviously not all of my proposals were always bought in, but a good chunk who were compared to before where almost nothing was bought in. So yeah, one of the biggest leverages in my career was not writing code or learning more technical skills. It was how to communicate my thinking, both through written means and through spoken means. And through the process, I was able to show that I understand how tech affects the business and have my solutions tie into that specific aspect of things, which help people perceive me differently and help me position myself differently. And the promotions and all just came. But, anyways, that was it for this video. Hope you find this valuable. And as always, I'm just here to help.